Hey, what is good, y'all? Thank you so much for joining us once again on an episode of the Coffee Roaster Warm-Up Sessions podcast. And today, dear friends, we're going to talk about something really basic, fun, exciting. I think it's the legendary of coffee brewers. It's super simple, but it's also kind of the backbone of many specialty cafes. It's what you walk in and the first thing that you look for, you know? We're going to talk about V60 brewers, brewing with the V60, pour overs, all that fun stuff, material, flow rate, brewing, recipes, all the good stuff. This is a complete V60 breakdown, one of our favorite brewers. But before, Sergio's already diving into some batchy.
Oh, yeah.
Couldn't quite wait for it.
No.
But, yeah. What's the verdict?
I mean, exactly. Almost to the T. 24 hours off of roast.
No
the
good.
way we like it,
No
or not
good.
like it.
No good, friends.
And horribly under extracted in a classic old-fashioned way.
Little
It
flash
doesn't
brew.
taste like anything.
Gah.
It's perfect. Like,
I was hoping there
it
would
gives
be a
me
good
the
brew
vibes.
today.
No, definitely not. Didn't hope enough. It definitely gives me the vibe of, okay, you're studying, you're crushing out, it's finals week, and you just need some caffeine. Who cares what it tastes like?
Man.
I mean, a little bit of flavor, actually.
No. I was gonna say, wait up. You're not giving this justice. This actually
It's
has
just bad.
for a day off of roast, less than 24 hours off of roast. This actually has flavor. It's not horribly under extracted. It's not horribly sour. This is a secret coffee yet to be released. We wanted to drop it this weekend, but oh gosh, when you have problems with your we like the guys who print the labels, but when it takes a month to
Yeah, I mean,
it's a little rough. So no, yeah. Anyways, things are getting figured out. We wanted to launch this coffee this week. It's not going to happen, so we're going to postpone it. Hopefully next weekend on the podcast, we'll be announcing a new coffee that's dropping. It's something we haven't dropped before. It's an origin that hasn't been featured on the Mirror menu to this day. It's something different, and I hope it's going to be something fun for y'all.
wait, have we launched the decaf?
No.
Oh, dang. Need to launch that.
Mm-hmm. So next weekend, y'all might be getting 2 coffees.
Maybe?
So yeah, but this coffee is just very, I remember like just cupping it, and it was, just a very unique flavor profile.
Yeah.
Like it was not something that I was used to.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't very common to me, but there was enough in there that really intrigued me, that on the cupping table with other coffees, we actually cupped it once and then cupped it again with different coffees. And we actually went back to blindly chose that one a second time, which is always a good sign when you blindly cup multiple tables of coffees and you pick blindly same coffee. You're like, okay,
for sure.
it's speaking something tasty to me. So
Can you recognize the processing method of this? I'm not gonna say what it is. I think if I was
a
cupping
little
this
bit,
again,
but
I would
not quite.
I would completely mistake in the processing without knowing what it's processed.
Yeah, it's
weird.
definitely
Yeah,
not. It doesn't taste like all of that processing method.
Stereotype.
So, anyways, I know it's kind of hard to talk about it
I'm
without
already done with
being able to exactly. It's gonna be good. I'm actually pretty pumped to drop something different on the menu, which is gonna be tasty. We have a lot of really great, crazy upcoming things, guys. July is gonna be insane. There's so many good stuff coming. We're gonna actually. I think we should just do a whole podcast on all the things that are coming.
Yeah.
Which there will be a lot of changes to Mirror in general, and a very, very exciting coffee coming in July as well, with a lot of other treats. It's gonna be insane.
I'm super stoked. It's my birthday.
That's true. Yeah, this will be a little tasty celebration.
Fun one.
We'll also always take off a weekend for Sergi's birthday and do a little trip excursion. So maybe we'll talk about the excursion on the podcast and share about our coffee experiences. We always have a lot of coffee, so should be a good time. But sucks to be able to mention this coffee, because it's like sometimes when you're like pumped about something, it's like you're like, I just want to spill the beans, but spill the beans. That was unintentional, but
no pun intended.
But it happened. So
grind the beans, not spill. So I think last week or somewhere during a roast, literally during a warm up, you're like, oh man, we need to drop this topic back again, bring it back up. The V60 convo.
It was stupid. I didn't even mean
I thought
it.
You were serious.
I didn't mean it. I wasn't serious.
I started preparing.
And then you're like,
I was like, let me do a little digging.
Do some research.
I know it, but let me do some digging. I think with that said, it's also fun that the V60 tutorial we threw out during the initial lockdowns of COVID, I look like a completely different person in that video, which is both good and bad. But like when we did that videos, I think one of our early on first tutorials that we published, was that our first tutorial we dropped?
One of the first, I think so.
It was that or the batch brew. And it was kind of like our staple recipe, which was super cool. But it also was, I would just say just a staple recipe.
Actually,
it's not bad.
At one point, actually, after that, because I was the one that proposed the recipe to you and we kind of agreed on it. And then I actually left that recipe. I went to do something very different. Mm-hmm. And then somehow, just through flavor, I was like, man, I don't know. And then I just like started to change it. And then I ended up literally back on the same recipe. Yeah. And then I'm like, oh, this is exactly what we talked. And I'm like, great. That means it's a solid. If you come back to that recipe, that means there's something tasty about it. Yeah. So that being said, since you brought up that video, if you guys want to go take a look at the video, it's crazy. It has over 100,000 views, which is insane to me. I know some of you coffee YouTubers out there. There's a couple of you that are like, dude, you guys are just peasants. 100,000 doesn't mean anything to us. It means a lot. So, and so it's awesome. A lot of people actually in the comments said, hey, this is just so simple. There's no BS. It's just very straight to the point. Yeah. And that was exactly why we wanted to make it, because we wanted to help people brew better coffee at home in a very simple way that's simple, not overcomplicated, and can get you a solid cup. In reality, it's just an overall great recipe. Yeah. So if you haven't seen it, go to our YouTube channel and check it out. It's one of our earlier videos. You can just search V60. Even if you just type into YouTube V60 recipe, it'll be one of the one at the top. So
with that said, I think V60s are great for a few reasons. They're very easy to find. Whether that you go through to a thrift store and find one, there's probably going to be some version of a V60 there. Not to be confused, of course, with like the Melita or the B Brewer. Dude, those are
knockoffs.
Deceiving.
They're everywhere, and you gotta
see those. You're like, oh, it's a V60. And you're like, dang, it's not. But anyway, like they're pretty accessible, which is great. Whether the plastic one is like $7 brand new, like $8. I think it's under $10 brand new.
Regardless,
grab one
it's
even
a
like
steal.
a Whole Foods.
You don't
have to buy it online.
Oh yeah.
Most cafes carry them.
By the way, Whole Foods is like coffee. I went to fill up the water jugs the other day. Yeah. I always stop by the coffee section. I'm like, okay, this actually slaps. Yeah, totally.
That's actually where I buy my filters.
Yeah, it has two different V60, two different Hario filters, which is shocking for a Whole Foods. And then they have Chemex. They have the Chemex Brewers. I think they have. They have an assortment. Actually, they have a pretty decent assortment of coffee. I would not recommend you to go buy coffee at Whole Foods, but if you have to, and you're like, I want coffee right now, it's like 11 p.m. or whatever, or 9 p.m., all the cafes are closed. Dude, just take a run to your local Whole Foods, and you'll find something decent. Like I saw, Man, I don't quite remember. I saw some single origin from Olympia Coffee Roasters.
Yep.
I saw some single origin from. It was one of the bigger, like nice, like third wave.
Yeah,
Anyways,
it's a paper bag with a heat stamp, the gold one. Not Hatch, no.
Onda.
Onda or Anna or something like that. Yeah.
Something that they have that. Yeah. I was also shocked. Like this last time that I was there, half that section was pretty much out of stock, and I'm like,
probably they're
that's so
probably
strange.
rotating coffees.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was, but anyways, that being said, their section slaps.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah, I think that's one of the great things about V60 is you can find it at a Whole Foods, you can find it at your local thrift store. And then on top of that, there's so many different versions. Even maybe like your local like ceramics or like pottery place is going to actually, if they make a coffee dripper, it's most likely going to be in the shape of a conical dripper, whether that's a perfect V60, because V60 stands for 60 degrees in the V shape. So you can just find them almost anywhere. And then on top of that, the materials of the actual cone, like go from everywhere from like a glass one. There's the copper one, there's the ceramic, plastic, and the one that intrigues me the most, I won't say the best one, but the one that intrigues me the most is the Studio Grom one I bought at Goodwill, with that double-walled carafe that looks like a fellow, but it's not.
The green one?
The rubber green one.
Okay, that speaking of thrift store finds, that was a steal. I have no idea where you found it, how you copped it. I don't know. I don't even know where you could find one.
No, I looked him up on Instagram. That
was
a
made by
random
Microsoft or something?
Someone that worked for Microsoft or Studio Grom made something for Microsoft. Because I found it on a website, it just doesn't sell. So there's pictures of it.
It's dope.
Yeah,
like it's sick.
Pretty sick. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the cool thing is rubber is actually not a heat conductor. It's a heat insulator. So it holds heat in. Even today, like I did a little fun little experiment. I threw it on the stag while it was boiling and let it heat up heat. Like that thing held the heat for a long time.
What'd you throw on the stag?
The brewer. I took the brewer and just tossed it onto the boiling stag. You know, the classic, open up the lid while
the stag. I thought you were talking about not the kettle.
Not the brewer.
Not the brewer,
not
the kettle.
Brewer, the kettle. I threw it on top of the stag kettle
to heat up.
while it was boiling to heat it up. Yeah. I usually do that to all of my brewers.
Yeah.
Because it really
that's
helps.
That's a little brewing hack sometimes. Yeah. If you just take off the top of your kettle, your stag kettle, and you place, a brewer on there, or I used to do that. I have a glass Kalita.
Yeah.
So you just put the glass Kalita like right into the top of the kettle as it's brewing. It's gonna heat up your brewer way better than just doing a rinse on the filter. Like it's gonna take a little bit more time, but it's very effective actually.
Yeah. With that said, I think ceramic, which that's what Narrative uses. That's what we use for a recipe. It's like been the staple, tried and true. And I even asked Alex today. I was like, "Why?" He's like, "Well, all of the coffees just taste better." So I don't really know the exact science behind it, but I'm gonna guess some of it has to do with like heat. Yeah. And the good thing is in a rush, when you're brewing a lot of filters, like I think in Bellingham, we definitely brew like multiple one after another. Yeah. In Everett, there's a lot of V60s just going. The actual cone, the V6 brewer, it stays hot because think about it. You just brewed one for 3 minutes of pouring and holding hot water or more. Yeah. Then you toss that out, put another filter, rinse that filter and brew another one. Like it actually holds heat for a long time. So either you do like an extended warm up session to it, or another pun not intended.
I thought, oh gosh,
yeah. This may not be an extended. I mean, even though we're already at 15 minutes, we just broke into our brewer talk. Yeah. But yeah, like so that's one. But there's different brewers that are more of like heat conductors, meaning they take heat from the water in the slurry and they suck it out. And then there's other brewers that take heat and they collect it. So a heat insulator. And rubber and plastic are insulators. Like when you look at a wire, on a wire, there's like a rubber coating, so it doesn't shock anyone, so protecting it. Same thing with heat. It doesn't conduct heat. It insulates it. So I technically lean, like, if I had to make a scientific choice, I would lean towards that, is to use like a plastic or a rubber one. But the weird thing is it doesn't necessarily translate to better flavor. And
I would say, like, it also doesn't mean that you can't get a good cup of coffee out of a ceramic one. So although and this might be something that we just need to do, is literally just take a rubber one, a plastic one, and a ceramic one, and a glass one, and just brew right next to each other, all the same recipes, and just cup them. Because, in the grand scheme of things, if you just have like a one-off brew, oftentimes these things are actually a little harder to pinpoint, especially when there's different variables involved, like, oh, your drawdown was a little longer, and then you're like, oh, this brings out more acidity. Well,
and so, like, I didn't do a full, like, in-depth scientific experiment, but I took my Comandante and just brewed it on like 15 clicks. Yeah. And got the drawdown time on this new coffee at like 3:30. Yeah. And it was just like great on the plastic one. Tried it. It was good brew, but it was one of our dial-in batches, so the coffee itself wasn't great. But I was like, okay, that works. Then I did it on the rubber one. Yeah. And same, like, warmed it up, did everything the same, and it was intensely brighter.
Really?
Not sour, but brighter. But the funny thing is, I think I enjoyed the first cup a little more.
Yeah, interesting.
Because I felt like the first cup was a little more balanced. Yeah. So again, like, I think there's these ideas that are more scientific, but and it makes sense why that would increase extraction. There's more heat. But I think at the end of the day, taste is king, right?
Yeah.
It's like whatever tastes best for you. Yeah. And hence, like, we at the cafe use ceramic brewers. Yeah. Which is weird, it almost sounds like it should be the other way around. But that's one of the things, like, I love the fact that, one, you can have all those brewers, like, they're actually inexpensive enough where you can buy, like, if you can find a rubber one, you can find a rubber one. I think the most expensive one is the copper one, which I have never used. Have you used the copper one? The copper one looks dope, though. It's so sick looking.
Yeah, you can only brew with the copper one if you have the kettle that has no handle. Oh, like, if you don't have that kettle, you're not allowed to. Kettle. You're not allowed to brew with the copper one. Just like those two things have to go hand in hand. Yes, that's
100%.
It's such a vibe. It's like every Indonesian video, they're like brewing coffee in the jungle somewhere, like by this beautiful waterfall. Like world class view, and then they have that like no handle kettle. It's like, dude, man, the vibes are just there. Next to their little motorcycles, their zipper.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, I think in general, I'll never leave the V60. I'll always probably have one.
I think it's a time tested, brewer that gets the job done really well. Yeah. And I mean, it's just a really great brewer that can produce really fantastic results. Do I think that someday we're gonna probably evolve out of it? Sure. But I think it's gonna take something really, really powerful to just come and dismantle the V60 when it's just such a solid brewer. Yeah. There's just so many perks to it. I mean, including like the price point, which you've already mentioned. Like, you're getting a brewer that can brew spectacular coffee at a fraction of the price. We're not talking about buying an espresso machine. Like, it's just insane. It's so tasty. So.
I mean, it's really even cheaper than buying an AeroPress, and we all say, like, AeroPress is so accessible, but a plastic V60 is even easier, and you can brew it into anything, any cup, the size of that diameter, which is pretty versatile. The base is pretty big, so I think this whole conversation and in general, when you brought it up, it reignited my passion for V60s because I've been all over the spectrum on brewers, right? I still have the AAA. I still brew AeroPress. Like, I've been brewing. You're a big
Stag fan at one point.
Big Stag fan, and I still brew on the Stag. I think that's also fun. Like, but when it comes to V60, tried and true. It's a staple. I'll probably never get rid of it. I think it's classic for me. So
the other thing that you need to acknowledge is that there's some challenges that come with, brewing on a conical shape brewer. Is that how your fines migrate and what happens at the bottom of the brewer, and the fact that it only has one outlet. It's not flat base.
Yeah.
So it only has a certain amount of surface area that the water can go through.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can get into problems with coffee's clogging, which is a pretty normal thing. What would you recommend for people who are just like, you're brewing it, you're turning the grinder coarser and coarser, it's still clogging? What are some tips, if you have any, what do you usually go to help solve the clogging issue in brewing?
Yeah. This may not be like the end all fix all kind of thing, but I think one of the things worth trying is changing your flow rate, because the amount of turbulence you add through a flow rate, depending on how hard you're pouring, is going to basically move those fines around and may push them towards the bottom and clog them on the bottom. But what you actually want to do is you want to fill up the cone higher. So if you're clogging, I would say fill up the cone higher. Therefore, those fines migrate to the top and maybe stick on the bottom, on the top instead of the bottom. So then when your water column moves down, it's not clogged on the bottom. So that really, really helps.
I think what's his face, actually, Lance Hendrick, recommended that you brew up higher brew and just apparently just pour straight in the middle, because then that creates pushes all the fines out to the wall.
Yep.
So that's why you're gonna have a lot more fines stuck on the wall that could help with drawdown. So
I think my bloom, I swirl a lot, especially on the V60. I swirl a lot on my bloom. Like I spread the coffee out pretty nicely, and then I collect all of my like fines in my first brew, in my first pulse. And I punch it with fast flow rate in the beginning. I like collect it, fill up the cone decently amount. That's probably my heaviest pour. But follow up, that's when I reduce the flow rate, because I don't want to move my fines around a lot.
Right.
Yeah.
And then the other thing what came to mind really is I bought those V60 Hario tabless filters, which I know you're a big fan of the tabless. I still use tabbed filters. I mean, they're a little less expensive. I'm just used to them. However, I did pick up a tabless filters, and I brewed it, and I was shocked that the same grind size, if I'm not mistaken, it actually draws down faster. Am I right?
It's been a while.
Or is it the other way around?
Into the filter? No, I think you're right. Because it's actually, I should have dove into the filters. Yeah. Because if I'm right, it does draw down faster, allowing you to grind finer without clogging, as far as I know. Yeah.
So that's also something like another variable, which I didn't even think about it before the podcast. Literally just came up to my mind. But I'm like, that's another thing that you can actually change. And I know Hario has two different filters, Sibarist, I think, or it's like that Nordic looking like packaging. I think it's SIB Barista or Ciber. I don't know. But anyways, apparently, I think Scott Rayo or Jonathan Gagney was like a fan of them, because they like sped up your brew as well. So there's multiple brands of filters now, which is crazy. It's become so popular that now you can actually, like, the versatility of the V60 is so huge now, because now you have different materials that you can use of the brewer itself. You have different filters, and then you can now experiment with flow rates and all those things that are actually going to change how your coffee brews. So if a coffee is stalling, you're able to you have so many variables that you can play with to be able to solve those issues that arise.
Yeah, and sometimes it's just dangerous to go like super coarse or super fine. You're just missing out on a lot of the coffee. And that's ultimately may not be the best way to tweak your total brew time.
Yes. And that's what I noticed is when you go too coarse, you run the risk of actually just taking out sweetness, and then just tastes like diluted, thin water. But you hit closer to your target time. So they're not quite synonymous. So
totally. So that's another thing that's great about the V60. there's so much versatility. I think we already said that,
And
but
because
just to repeat that. Yeah.
And because it's popular also,
Exactly.
the fact that people are actually doing things with it. I mean, now you have stuff like the origami, which, whatever you think about it, it's really just a V60 with, a modulated brewer shape, so to speak.
It's still conical.
It's still conical. It's still, I
Totally.
think, 60 degrees. It just now has
Yeah.
ridges. So it's like,
Yeah.
there's so much innovation around this one brewer
Yeah.
that makes it just super dope.
I think
super cool.
someone, I don't remember who it was, maybe it was Lance, that said even the Kona brewer, which is another conical brewer, is like one of his favorites.
Yeah.
So the conical shape, I think, is just super popular.
Yeah.
And Hario, or is it Hario that pioneered that shape?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So V60 has been like kind of the model of everything that we've been,
Shout out to good old Edwin Martinez,
Oh,
just
that's right.
down here in town in Bellingham, sourcing some really tasty Guatemalan coffee. If you're a roaster and you're looking for tasty Guatemalan coffees, hit them up. They have some solid Guatemalan coffees. We're already forward booked, more than a sack and a half.
Tasty stuff.
And we're looking forward to fresh harvest landing in the coming months. But pick some coffee up from them. But what I meant was shout out to Edwin, who literally I think he actually did pioneer V60s into the country.
Yeah, he brought him.
Which is that story is insane. If you want to know more about that story, listen to our podcast episode with Edwin Martinez. It's so good.
Yeah.
So shout out to him for bringing that over. But yeah, that's V60s, kind of a little V60 breakdown. So
Exactly.
cool. Well, folks, hopefully you learned something about V60s. Maybe this might help you brew that gross, stalled Ethiopian coffee that you've been struggling with. It's always the Ethiopian. Thank you so much for listening and tuning in. Hopefully you enjoyed this one. And folks, remember, reflect what's good.